Born from fire, surrounded by hatred, Ida B. Wells spearheaded the movement against lynching. Using only a pen, Wells single-handedly changed the mindset of a nation. As a civil rights activist, Wells proved to the United States that neither color nor gender was important when inducing change in a discriminating society. Born in the Jim Crow era during the late 19th century, Ida B. Wells faced a nation plagued by injustice. Fearful of losing their superiority to African Americans, whites were determined to inflict terror among blacks through lynching. These vulgar displays of power went unchallenged until Ida B. Wells voiced the truth behind these cruel practices. She stood up against the oppression of African Americans and set in motion the tide of justice for her people. Through the inhumane practice of lynching, countless innocent African American men were killed, with the inclusion of their wives, children, friends, and anyone else related to the crime that these men had committed according to the mobs. With her race treated and slaughtered like wild animals, Wells became the voice that fought against the evil aspects of human relations in America.
In many ways, it was worse than slavery. She was one of the very few people who was speaking out against lynching at that time. That made her automatically radical. Very few black people would speak out.
Through journalism and the media, Ida B. Wells led her race and held the torch that shed light on the atrocious aspects of segregation in America. Although born with restrictions that chained her hands and constricted her throat, Wells decided to cross her boundaries as an African American woman, and, with her voice and her pen uncapped, expressed her opinions on the injustice of her people. Using her natural talent as a speaker and writer, she exposed the cruel, everyday treatment that African Americans were forced to endure. Somebody must show that the Afro-American race is more sinned against than sinning, and it seems to have fallen upon me to do so. Wells's commitment for the justice of her race stems from being confronted by the discrimination between whites and blacks that she experienced at a young age. Born to parents who were still slaves, she witnessed the harsh oppression perpetrated by the whites against her parents and other slaves as a child. However, the slaves were rewarded a tremendous change after being freed by the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Though finally released from the shackles of slavery, inhumane treatment directed towards African Americans continued. Unfortunately, when Wells was the young age of 16, her family was struck with a major tragedy. While she was away visiting her grandmother, a wave of yellow fever struck Tennessee. This epidemic swept through Holly Springs, causing the deaths of her mother, father, and 10-month-old brother. Now orphaned, Wells was weighed with the responsibility to choose between separating her 3 remaining siblings and sending them away, or keeping them together. Firmly opposed to the idea of leaving her siblings and determined to keep her family together, she made a risky and burdensome decision of becoming a school teacher at age 16 in Shelby County, Tennessee, to support her family. Teaching helped Wells financially, but as racial injustice around her heightened, she became determined to be the change that she wished to see. As her teaching career came to a halt, a new career suddenly bloomed: journalism.
Being a teacher was a bit of a big deal. But she gives that up because she feels like there's a mission for her in being a journalist and being an activist.
In 1884, Wells was asked by the conductor of the train she boarded to give up her seat to a white man and then ordered to move into the smoking car, or Jim Crow car. In her autobiography, Crusade for Justice, Wells stated, "I refused, saying that the forward car, closest to the locomotive, was a smoker, and as I was in the ladies' car, I proposed to stay. The conductor tried to drag me out of the seat, but the moment he caught hold of my arm, I fastened my teeth into the back of his hand." Wells described her annoyance further, mentioning that she took her case to court. Suing the railroad company and winning $500, the railroad company appealed to the Supreme Court of Tennessee and reversed the lower court's ruling, resulting in Wells paying the court costs. This dramatic event made headlines in the Memphis Appeal. The full headline reading, A darky damsel obtains a verdict for damages against the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, what it cost to put a colored schoolteacher in a smoking car. Verdict for $500. Wells sent a detailed writing on her experience, criticizing the racial discrimination her race was facing to her Baptist Church Weekly, titled The Living Way. Signing under the pen name Iola, her article received such a positive response and favorable attention that the pastor asked her to write in the magazine weekly. As Wells continued to write for free speech and eventually became part owner, her writing became so popular that she made Free Speech the most popular black publication in the country. Facing a cruel racial violence in 1892, Wells urged African Americans in Memphis to leave. Save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but takes us out and murders us in cold blood when accused by white persons.
Again, she was ahead of her time on so many ways in helping organize people to leave and set up their own independent business and households away from the entrenched racism in the South was a somewhat novel idea.
Bringing the truth to light and ignoring the consequences that lied in the future, Wells risked her reputation, job, and life to voice out on lynching and the racial discrimination her race was forced to endure.
The thing I can say about Ida B. Wells, she was able to face challenge after challenge and never was defeated. She did it almost single-handedly.
Exposing the horrors of lynching one article at a time, Wells shared gruesome stories, uncovering the cruelty African Americans have been experiencing.
People think that they are lynching barbarians, but indeed it's the white people who were lynching that were indeed not civilized.
As well as expressing animosity towards whites for their hatred towards her people, Wells even criticized African Americans if their motives were not for the best of their race. During her career, Wells was constantly reminded of her restrictions due to her race and gender, from having both white and African American people criticizing her writings as crossing the line, to white publications citing her writings as black arrogance. She did not let meaningless comments affect her work. Wells proved her strength as a leader through the words she spilled on the page and was constantly traveling to bring awareness. Wells proved to everyone that footsteps in history did not need to be made by only white men, and men in general. She was one of the most influential female African American journalists of her time, and strives to make the country not view each other separately because of differences in skin color, but see each other as one, the human race. Even though she was born a slave, Wells died with her wings spread freely out. She led an almost one-woman campaign against lynching, while also being a pioneer in the civil rights movement. Wells was not only a suffragette, politician, and a leader for her race, but she also founded the Negro Fellowship League in 1908, as well as the very first African American suffrage club in 1913. Celebrating its 106th anniversary this year, the NAACP has become a substantial part of Wells's legacy, being the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization, still fighting for social justice for all Americans today. Fueled by her willingness, Ida B. Wells dauntlessly took the first steps towards racial equality, crossing social boundaries that no one had ever dared to cross before. Even when threatened to be killed the moment she returned to Memphis by a white mob who had also raided her first newspaper company's building and house, Wells did not take steps back when facing difficulties, rather took these moments as an opportunity to move forward. She was the warrior that fought for her race, sacrificing everything to enforce and strengthen African Americans' natural rights, giving them an identity. Never losing sight of her goals, Wells was a visionary leader who became the change that she strived to see, advancing her race tremendously. Ida B. Wells continues to stand as the forgotten warrior in the battlefield of racism, as she fought with her pen uncapped and changed the lives of millions.